Topic is Introduction to Jurisprudence. So let us see what is meant by jurisprudence and what is the meaning of jurisprudence. Then other factors which are related to jurisprudence. So when it comes to the term jurisprudence, it is nothing but the study of the science of law, the concepts, principles, and philosophies underpinning the law we are studying under the jurisprudence. Then there is a legal and regulatory framework which we have to follow in each and every country, and there are many laws involved in that. A study about the science of all these laws are called the jurisprudence. So first of all, let us see the definition of law. Law is defined in different ways by different schools. So when you look into jurisprudence, law is defined by various schools under jurisprudence. And the first school is the natural law school. There are many definitions given under the natural law school concept. According to Cicero, law is the highest reason implanted in nature. So natural law is giving importance to the reason of people. It is actually the highest reason which we can find in the nature as per Cicero's definition. According to Justinian's Digest, law is the standard of what is just and unjust. Even Hinduism mentions about law as a part of the Dhamma we were following in the ancient times. And law is the body of principles recognized and applied by the state in the administration of justice. So Salmond is the jurist who has brought the concept of justice under the natural law school. Then comes the positivist definition. According to John Austin, who is the propounder of this positive concept, law is the command of the sovereign. Command is nothing but the orders of the sovereign. And this orders applies a certain course of conduct or imposes a duty and is backed by a sanction. Sanction means the punishment or the pain attached to non-obedience of a order. Non-obedience of a command of the sovereign. Sovereign is the supreme power. According to John Austin, there are three elements to the law: command, duty, and sanction. Then there is the pure theory of law propounded by Kelsen. According to him, law is a normative science. The science of law is the knowledge of hierarchy of the normative relations. So when it comes to law, there is a level, there are different levels of normative relations are there. And it is in the shape of a pyramid, and all the norms are deriving their power from the ultimate norm called the grand norm. If you take the case of India, Indian constitution is the grand norm, and all other norms and rules of our country are generating their power from this constitution. So this is called the grand norm of our country. Then there is a historical school. As per historical school, Savigny's theory of law is there. Law is a matter of unconscious and organic growth according to this theory. Law is found and it is not made by any person. Its nature is it is universal. With like a language, law varies with people and ages. Law should always conform to the popular consciousness of the people. That means law has its source in the common consciousness. And Savigny called it Volgeist of the people. And according to him, legislation is the last stage of lawmaking. Sir Henry Maine told that law is related to notion of order and force. So there is a systematic order by which we are following the law and it is having a force. That's what Sir Henry Maine has told. Then there is sociological school, according to which Law is essentially and exclusively a social act. It's a definition given by Duguid. Law is the only means of social control. Law is to serve a social purpose and it is coercive in character. That is what the definition of Irving is. Law is a social institution to satisfy social wants as per Roscoe Pond. So these are all schools by which under jurisprudence we are defining what is meant by law. So ultimately, jurisprudence is nothing but a systematic study of the law or the science of law. Now comes the realist definition. Holmes and Cardoso are the propounders of this realism. According to realism, law presupposes a state. It's a must that to have a law, we must have a state. The state makes or authorizes to make or recognizes or sanctions rules which are called a law. For the rules to be effective, there are sanctions behind them. That means punishment is attached. These rules called laws are made to serve some purpose. The purpose may be a social purpose or it may be simply to serve some personal ends of a despot. Separate rules and principles are known as laws. Such law may be in the character of mandatory, prohibitive, or permissive. A mandatory law calls for an affirmative act, as in the case of law requiring the payment of the taxes. A prohibitive law requires negative conduct, as in the case of law prohibiting the carrying of concealed weapon or running a lottery. A permissive law is one which neither requires nor forbids action, but allows certain conduct on the part of an individual if he desires to act. And laws are made effective by certain actions. The first one is by requiring damages to be paid for an injury due to disobedience. If you are not obeying the law, you have to pay some kind of a compensation. And by requiring one to complete obligations he failed to perform. We are having certain duties in the society. There are certain obligations which are told by the laws of our country. If we are not completing that, it is not allowed. By preventing disobedience to law, then by administering some form of punishment. So these are all the means by which laws are made effective in our country. Then let us see the significance of law. Law concentrates on the socio-economic justice in the modern times. Modern states are based on welfare concept. What is this welfare concept? Greatest happiness to the maximum number of people. So when the state is framing a law, it has to concentrate on the welfare of the people. Greatest happiness to the maximum number of people the law has to provide. Then only the law can be a weapon to concentrate on the socio-economic justice. And Indian law has its origin from the principal and secondary sources. Now let us see the principal sources of the law in our country. The first one is the customs and the customary laws. Second one is the judicial decisions or precedents. Third is the statutes or legislations. Fourth one is the personal laws of our country. Let us see each of these ones one by one. Customs comes first. Customs without sanction and having sanction are there. Without sanction means it is only positive morality followed because of the pressure of public opinion. Having sanction means the customs enforced by the state. Then it is divided into legal and conventional customs. Conventional means usages which are coming out of the agreement complying law of the land. Legal customs can be local, further classified into geographical and personal or general customs. The general customs prevails throughout the country. Example, common law of England. The requisites of a valid custom are listed out. Customs valid at law and having binding force only when they are fulfilling certain requisites. The first one is antiquity. That means the customs must exist from ancient times. This character is called immemorial. You cannot trace back the origin of this custom. Then only it is valid. Custom must be certain and definite. Certainty should be attached to custom. It must not be simply vague and ambiguous. Custom must be reasonable. That means it must be useful and convenient to the society. It should not be against the principles of justice, equity, and good conscience. Compulsory observance of the customs is important. That means customs are continuously observed without any interruption and people regard it as binding. And conformity with law and public morality is also important. All must enjoy these customs. That means unanimity of opinion must be there in following the customs. Peaceable enjoyment is another factor which adds validity to a custom. And of course, all the customs must be consistent. Consistency is a factor which makes a custom a valid custom. Then the second source called the judicial decision or precedents. It's based on the principle that like cases to be treated alike. It is about the authority of past decisions of courts on future cases. And there is a doctrine attached to this called the doctrine of stare decisis. Certainty and uniformity to law is based on public policy and expediency. The decisions of the High Court is binding on all the subordinate courts and tribunals within its jurisdiction. In our country, Supreme Court is the apex court, and below the Supreme Court there are high courts in each and every state, and there are subordinate courts and tribunals below the High Court in hierarchy. So all the courts, all the subordinate courts which are coming below in line to the High Court has to follow the decisions of the High Court. It is mandatory to follow. And the decision of one High Court is having only a persuasive effect on another High Court. That means the decision of the Chennai High Court is having only a persuasive effect on Kerala High Court. Kerala High Court may consider it, but it is not totally binding on the Kerala High Court to follow the precedent of the Chennai High Court. And when there is a conflict between two decisions of co-equal benches, better decision is followed. And smallest bench in the High Court is called the single bench. Two judges form a division bench. When three or more judges are there, it forms the full bench. And decision of the higher benches of the court binding on the smaller ones. This is the hierarchy. When there is difference of opinion between the coordinate benches, matter is referred to a full bench. And as per Article 141, Supreme Court decisions are binding on all other courts in India because Supreme Court is the apex court in India. As per our constitution, it is getting the powers. And all the decisions of the Supreme Court are binding on all other courts in India. Only a ratio decidendi of a decision has the binding force. That also we have to understand. Higher courts are not bound by their own decisions. English decisions have only a persuasive value in India. That means law of the land is Indian law. We have to follow the Indian law and precedents only. British precedents are having only a persuasive effect in India. Then, let us see the classification of the precedents. The first one is declaratory precedent. It's simply an application of the existing law of the country, it just declares a law. Then comes the original precedent. It is one which creates and applies new rule of law. New laws are made by this original precedents. Persuasive precedent is not a legal source of law. It's not binding. It's only a historical source because it is taken into consideration and given some weight. Absolutely authoritative precedents are there. It is absolutely binding, excluding all the discretion aside. There can be conditionally authoritative precedents also based on some future condition. What is the meaning of this ratio decidendi which we have mentioned earlier? It is decision of a court based on material facts of the case. An underlying principle of a decision which is authoritative is called the ratio decidendi. And this ratio decidendi is having the effect of a precedent. There is some other factor called the obituary dicta. The meaning of obituary dicta is said by the way. It's not binding, but judges take advantage of obituary dicta while deciding cases. And the next source is the statutes or legislation. Statutes are nothing but a declaration of a legal rule by an authority empowered by the Constitution. As per the Constitution, there are lawmaking bodies. Once a law is made by these lawmaking bodies, it is called a statute. For example, in India, Parliament is the supreme body which is making the laws for our country. It is called a jus scriptum or written law. Statute is a written law. Salmon calls it enacted law because it is enacted by some authority. In India, it is the parliament which is enacting a law. So, statute is created by legislation. It can be supreme legislation or subordinate legislation. Subordinate legislation is also called a delegated one. Supreme legislation proceeds from the sovereign power. That means supreme power of a country. And it is deriving its power from the constitution. It cannot be repelled, annulled, or controlled by any other legislative authority. And now comes the fourth primary source called the personal laws. In our country, all the religions are having their own personal laws. Muslims are having laws based on Shariat, Hindus are having laws based on the Hindu law, and even for the Christians, there is a law, separate law called the personal laws of the people. And this is also a primary source of law for our country. Second category is the secondary sources of law. Secondary sources of law are the principles which are based on the concept of justice, equity, and good conscience. In the absence of a statute, Indian courts are applying this principle to decide the cases. When it comes to a court, whatever case is coming before a court, anyway the decision is to be taken by the court. The court cannot say no to a person who is coming with a case to the court. So when there is no law or there is no particular law to be applied in a particular situation, the judges can always get the support of these principles of justice, equity, and good conscience. Equity just means fairness we are following. Equality concept. Now let us see the sources of English law. The first one is the common law. It has originated from the customs of the British people. Then law merchant, customs followed between business people. from the word itself you can understand. Then principles of equity. Its conscience developed in the courts of chancery. There were separate courts in Britain where the principles of equity were applied, called the courts of chancery. Then statute law. That means the enacted law of England, originally from either parliament or by a subordinate legislation. Then let us see what is meant by mercantile law. It is nothing but lex mercatoria related to commercial activities. It originated from usages and customs of merchants. A part of the common law, sources are the law merchant, statutes, principles of equity, and the common law. Before 1872, mercantile transactions, that means commercial transactions in India, were regulated by personal laws of the parties. Indian Contract Act is passed thereafter. Now let us see the sources of the Indian mercantile law. First one is the English mercantile law. Second is the acts enacted by Indian legislature, maybe the parliament or the state legislature. Then judicial decisions called the precedents, customs and trade usages. So that is all we have to cover today. Thank you everybody.